Admiral Kim Jisoo pressed her palm against the cold metal of the viewport, watching the massive Valkyrian war fleet emerge from hyperspace like dark thunderclouds rolling across the horizon. The enemy ships stretched as far as her eyes could. See? Their black hulls gleaming with weapon arrays that could turn planets to glass. Behind her, the bridge of the Determination hummed with nervous energy as her crew worked at their stations with practiced efficiency, despite the fear she could smell in the recycled air. Lieutenant Park Min-ho's hands shook as he decoded the incoming transmission from Earth Command. The young officer had joined the fleet just 6 months ago, fresh from the academy on Mars, with dreams of exploring distant stars. Now his face had the hollow look of someone who had seen too much death in too little time. The message crystal. In his hands glowed red with urgent priority codes. "Admiral," Min-ho's voice cracked slightly before he cleared his throat and tried again. "Earth Command orders immediate withdrawal to the Sol system. All remaining forces are to abandon Kepler Station and fall back to defensive positions around Jupiter." The bridge fell silent, except for the steady beeping of sensor arrays tracking the approaching enemy fleet. Jisoo turned from the viewport to face her crew, taking in each familiar face. Chief Engineer Bai Junsu had oil stains on his uniform, from trying to keep their damaged engines running. Navigation Officer Oh Seo-yeon clutched her lucky charm, a small stone from her homeworld that the Valkyrians had glassed 3 months ago. Weapons Specialist Ryu Jae-hyun sat rigid at his console, his cybernetic arm still sparking from the last battle where shrapnel had torn through the bridge. Commander Lee Hana stepped forward, her tactical display showing the grim numbers in holographic. Red. 23 human ships against over 200 Valkyrian vessels. The math was simple and brutal. "Admiral, the fleet captains are requesting immediate orders. Captain Cho on the Defiance reports his port engines are offline. The Steadfast has lost primary weapons. The Valiant is running on emergency power only." Jisoo nodded slowly, her dark eyes reflecting the tactical display's harsh light. She had fought alongside these ships and their crews for 8 months, watching them transform from a proper military formation into something harder and more desperate. They had started this war with 47 vessels and dreams of quick victory. Now they were the last human fleet, standing between the Valkyrians and Earth itself. The enemy had a pattern she knew. They would surround the station, demand surrender, and offer terms that seemed reasonable. Most civilizations took the deal, becoming client states in the Valkyrian Empire. It was practical, logical, and smart. The alternative was total annihilation. But as Jisoo looked at her crew, she realized something had changed in the human spirit during these months of losing battles. They had watched their friends die, seen their colonies burned, and witnessed the systematic destruction of everything they held dear. Somewhere along the way, the fear of death had been replaced by something else entirely. She walked to the center of the bridge and activated the fleet-wide communication channel. Every ship in her small fleet would hear these words, along with the crew of Kepler Station, who had volunteered to stay behind and keep the massive orbital platform operational until the last possible moment. "All ships, this is Admiral Kim Jisoo," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the comm system. "I have received orders to retreat. Earth Command wants us to run home with our tails between our legs and hope the enemy shows mercy when they arrive at our doorstep." She paused, watching the tactical display as the Valkyrian fleet began forming their traditional encirclement pattern. They moved with mechanical precision, each ship taking its assigned position in a formation they had used successfully against 12 different species. "But I've been thinking about something," Jisoo continued, her voice growing stronger. "We've been retreating for 8 months. Every time we pull back, they move forward. Every time we give ground, they take more. Well, I'm done running. We hold the line here. No retreat, no surrender. If humanity is going to fall, then by God, we're going to make them remember this day." The response from her fleet was immediate. Captain Kim Dong-yun of the Defiance was first to respond, his gravelly voice carrying years of military service. "Copy that, Admiral. Defiance stands ready." One by one, every ship captain confirmed their commitment. The Valkyrians probably monitored their communications, but Jisoo didn't care. Let them hear human defiance in every word. The enemy fleet completed their encirclement and began broadcasting their standard surrender demand in a dozen galactic languages. Jisoo listened to the translated version with growing disgust. They offered work programs, relocation assistance, and integration into the Valkyrian Empire. The same lies they had told the Centaurians before enslaving their entire population. Instead of responding to their offer, Jisoo gave the order that would define humanity's future among the stars. All ships, full power to engines. Target their capital vessels, ramming speed. The human fleet accelerated directly toward the heart of the Valkyrian formation, damaged engines screaming with overload warnings and weapon systems charging for one final devastating blow that would echo across the galaxy. The quantum relay networks hummed across the galaxy, carrying news faster than any starship could travel. In the deepest corners of space, automated stations picked up the encrypted transmissions and bounced them from system to system until every inhabited world in known space received the same impossible message. Humanity had refused to retreat. Centauri Prime, deep beneath the planet's purple-tinted surface, Han Sujin felt the plasma drill vibrate in her hands as she carved through veins of crystallized energy ore. The mine stretched for kilometers in every direction, filled with workers from a dozen different species, all laboring under Valkyrian supervision. The air tasted of metal and desperation, filtered through recycling systems that barely kept them alive. Sujin had been a teacher before the conquest, educating children about Earth's history and culture. Now her hands were scarred from handling mining equipment, and her back ached from 12-hour shifts in tunnels that barely allowed her to stand upright. Like all human colonists on conquered worlds, she wore a tracking collar that monitored her location and vital signs. Escape was impossible, resistance was suicide, and hope had died 3 years ago when the Valkyrian ships first darkened their skies. But today was different. The message came through a worker's modified communication device, smuggled parts assembled in secret over months of careful planning. Static filled the cramped tunnel before clearing to reveal Admiral Kim Jisoo's final transmission. Her voice echoed off the rock walls as she declared humanity's refusal to surrender, followed by the sounds of battle and the death screams of both human and Valkyrian ships. "They actually did it," whispered No Kyung-soo, a former engineer who worked the drill next to Sujin. His eyes were wide with disbelief as he listened to the tactical reports. 23 ships against their entire fleet, and they chose to fight. The word spread through the mining tunnels like electricity through copper wire. Workers stopped their drilling to listen, gathering in small groups around hidden communication devices. The Valkyrian overseers, tall insectoid creatures with compound eyes and clicking mandibles, noticed the disruption, but couldn't understand its source. They barked orders in their harsh language, threatening punishment for decreased productivity. But something had changed in the miners' faces. For the first time in 3 years, Sujin saw hope flickering in human eyes. Meanwhile, light years away in the crystalline towers of the Valkyrian homeworld, War Marshal Thexelar stood before the Supreme Council with reports that defied everything. Their empire represented. The council chamber stretched high above him, its walls carved from living crystal that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. The 7 ruling councillors perched on elevated platforms, their insectoid forms draped in ceremonial armor that marked their status as masters of the galaxy's largest empire. "Explain to us again how a fleet of 23 damaged vessels inflicted such casualties," hissed Councillor Vexamiran, her compound eyes reflecting the chamber's eerie light. "Your reports claim we lost 18 capital ships and over 40 escort vessels." Thexelar's mandibles clicked nervously as he accessed his holographic display. 3-dimensional images showed the battle from multiple angles, captured by automated recording drones. The human ships accelerated directly into Valkyrian formations, their crews detonating reactor cores and ramming damaged vessels into enemy dreadnoughts with surgical precision. The humans fought with complete disregard for their own survival, he explained, his translator device converting his clicks and hisses into galactic standard. "When we offered terms of surrender, they responded by targeting our command ships specifically. Their admiral transmitted personal messages to our fleet, commanders taunting them to come closer. Councillor Zekthara leaned forward, her ancient form creaking with mechanical augmentations. In 400 years of conquest, no species has ever chosen total annihilation over integration into our empire. The mathematics of survival demand submission when faced with overwhelming force. The humans are clearly insane, declared Vexmiran, her voice carrying the authority of countless victories. Mental deficiency explains their irrational behavior. This changes nothing about our expansion plans. But even as she spoke those words, reports flooded in from across the empire. On the mining world of Kepler 442b, the reptilian Saurian workers had stopped their excavation operations and were gathering in large groups, sharing recordings of the human fleet's final stand. The aquatic Delphians on their ocean world had begun organizing underwater assemblies, their bioluminescent communication networks lighting up with discussions of human courage. Even the mechanical synthetics, artificial beings created by a long-dead civilization, were analyzing the tactical data and reaching conclusions that disturbed their Valkyrian overseers. The word retreat was being discussed on 17 different worlds, not as military strategy, but as a concept that apparently no longer existed in human vocabulary. Back on Earth, in the underground command bunkers beneath the Himalayan mountains, General Yun Tai-hyung studied the tactical reports with growing amazement. The holographic display showed every detail of the battle, transmitted by long-range sensors before the human fleet's destruction. His staff officers stood silently around the war table, processing what they had witnessed. "Sir," said Colonel Park Minji, her voice filled with a mixture of grief and pride, "Admiral Kim's fleet inflicted a casualty ratio of nearly 3-to-1 against superior numbers and technology. The enemy expected quick surrender and positioned their ships for intimidation rather than actual combat." Tai-hyung nodded slowly, his weathered face reflecting years of military service and the weight of defending humanity's last stronghold. He had studied every major battle in human history, from ancient conflicts fought with spears and shields to modern space warfare involving antimatter weapons and quantum shields. But this was different. "They won by refusing to lose," he said, finally, his words carrying throughout the command center. "Admiral Kim understood something we missed in all our strategic planning. Our greatest weapon isn't our technology or our tactics. It's our absolute refusal to accept defeat." The implications hit the room like a shockwave as his officers realized what this meant for Earth's defense. General Yun Tai-hyung stood in the war room deep beneath Seoul, surrounded by holographic displays showing every major city on Earth. 6 months had passed since Admiral Kim Jisu's final stand at Kepler Station, and humanity had used every single day to transform their world into something the galaxy had never seen before. The comfortable illusion of civilian life had been stripped away, replaced by a harsh reality where every human being was both protector and weapon. "Protocol Phoenix is now active across all continents," reported Colonel Park Minji, her fingers dancing across the tactical interface. "Civilian training completion rate stands at 97%. Infrastructure modification is at 100% in major population centers." Tai-hyung nodded grimly as he watched the transformation. Data scrolled past. The protocol's name came from the mythical bird that rose from its own ashes, but their version was more brutal. Humanity would burn everything they had built, rather than let the Valkyrians claim it intact. Every factory, every school, every home had been converted into a potential weapon or fortress. In the suburbs of New Tokyo, engineer Choi Ji-hye crawled through maintenance tunnels beneath the city's water treatment facility. Her coveralls were stained with chemical residue, and her hands showed burn marks from working with materials never meant for human contact. Before the war, she had designed systems to purify water for millions of people. Now, those same systems had been modified to deliver death. "Testing Dispersal System 7, she spoke into her communication device, her voice echoing through the concrete tunnels. Above her, the facility hummed with machinery that could switch from producing clean drinking water to creating chemical clouds in less than 30 seconds. The Valkyrians would expect to capture Earth's infrastructure intact, using it to support their occupation forces. Instead, they would find every system had been turned into a trap. Her assistant, Technician Lim Soo-hyun, monitored the chemical levels from a safe distance. "All readings are within acceptable parameters," he reported. "The mixture will disperse through their atmospheric processes and affect their entire respiratory system, non-lethal to humans with proper protection, but fatal to Velkarian physiology." Across the city, in what used to be Hangang Elementary School, teacher Nam Sunwoo knelt beside 8-year-old Jung Min-seo, helping the child attach guidance systems to a drone no larger than a hummingbird. The classroom walls were covered with technical diagrams and tactical maps instead of alphabet charts and math problems. Child safety had become a luxury humanity could no longer afford. "Remember, Min-seo," Sunwoo said gently, her voice carrying the same patience she once used to teach reading and writing. "The red button arms the explosive. The blue button sends it to the target coordinates. You only use this if the bad aliens come to our neighborhood, understand?" The little girl nodded seriously, her small fingers surprisingly steady as she programmed flight patterns into the device. Around them, other children worked with similar equipment under the watchful eyes of teachers who had traded lesson plans for weapons training. The innocence of childhood had been sacrificed on the altar of species survival. When the Velkarian second wave finally arrived in Earth's solar system, their massive fleet expected to find a broken world ready for occupation. Instead, long-range sensors detected energy signatures, unlike anything in their military databases. Earth cities pulsed with hidden power sources, and even rural areas showed defensive preparations that defied conventional warfare. General Kethvar commanded the ground invasion from his flagship, a massive troop transport designed to deploy occupation forces quickly and efficiently. His compound eyes studied the tactical displays as his scouts reported increasingly bizarre intelligence. "War Marshal," he clicked into his communication array. "The human settlements show no military formations, but every structure radiates weapon signatures. We cannot distinguish between civilian and military targets because they appear to be identical." The first landing craft touched down in what intelligence indicated was a farming community outside Prague. The Velkarian soldiers, each standing nearly 3 meters tall with natural armor plating and razor-sharp claws, advanced through wheat fields toward a cluster of simple houses. Their sensors detected no military installations, no heavy weapons, no strategic value of any kind. The farmhouse exploded when they were 50 meters away, not from artillery or airstrikes, but from the building itself. The structure had been packed with explosives and rigged to detonate when motion sensors detected approaching Velkarian biosignatures. What followed was not a battle, but a methodical slaughter, as every barn, shed, and grain silo revealed itself to be a disguised weapon. Within hours, similar reports flooded in from landing sites across the planet. In the ruins of Berlin, Velkarian troops found themselves fighting not against soldiers, but against elderly humans who threw themselves at enemy positions while triggering hidden explosives. Children emerged from school buildings carrying weapons, too advanced for their size, operated with deadly precision by small hands trained in the art of species survival. Captain Nexkalar led his squad through what remained of downtown London, their heavy armor scarred by constant attacks from every direction. "Command, this is Squad 7, he transmitted, his voice tight with frustration. "We have secured the target building, but casualties are at 60%. The humans have weaponized their architecture. Every doorway, every staircase, every window contains some form of trap or explosive device. The Velkarian military doctrine, perfected through centuries of conquering passive civilizations, crumbled against an enemy that viewed every square meter of their world as a battlefield, worth dying for. Tank columns found roads that exploded beneath their weight. Air support discovered that human cities generated electromagnetic pulses strong enough to disable their guidance systems. Supply lines faced constant attack from an enemy that appeared to be the entire civilian population. General Kethvar watched his casualty reports climb to numbers that should have been impossible for a planetary occupation. "They don't fight like soldiers," he reported to his superiors, his mandibles clicking with exhaustion and growing fear. "They fight like every single one of them would rather die than live under our rule." I have never encountered an enemy that considers mutual destruction to be victory. The occupation of Earth had become a nightmare, where success was measured not in territory controlled, but in Valkyrian lives lost per meter of ground gained. For the first time in their empire's history, the invaders began to question whether some worlds were simply too expensive to conquer. The quantum communication networks that had once carried news of humanity's defeat now pulsed with something far more dangerous, hope mixed with desperate fury. Across 17 different star systems, species that had accepted Valkyrian rule for decades suddenly found themselves questioning why they had surrendered so easily. The human example spread like a virus through the galaxy's oppressed populations, transforming conquered worlds into powder kegs ready to explode. On the ocean world of Aquatia, beneath waves that stretched unbroken from pole to pole, the Delphian cities floated in bioluminescent splendor. These graceful beings had evolved in the planet's endless seas, their translucent bodies pulsing with natural light as they communicated through complex patterns of color and rhythm. For 8 years, they had served the Valkyrian Empire without complaint, their underwater cities providing rare minerals extracted from deep ocean trenches. But everything changed when Elder Reef Singer Nyaleth received Captain Songhyok's final transmission. The human captain had managed to escape the destruction of his vessel above Kepler Station, crash landing on a remote asteroid where he spent his final days recording tactical manuals for any species willing to listen. His voice, translated into Delphian sonic patterns, echoed through the coral chambers of New Tiamat as he explained how humans had transformed their cities into weapons. "The key is not to think like soldiers," Songhyok's recorded voice explained, his words accompanied by technical diagrams showing explosive placement and trap construction. "Think like people who have nothing left to lose. Every beautiful thing you've built can become a weapon. Every place you call home can become a fortress. The enemy expects you to value your lives more than your freedom. Prove them wrong." Nyaleth's bioluminescent patches flickered with colors that had no translation. In any galactic language, emotions too deep and ancient for words, she called together the Council of Depths, representing every major city across Aquatia's vast oceans. The emergency assembly convened in the deepest trench, where pressure and darkness had always symbolized serious deliberation. "The humans have shown us something we forgot during our years of comfortable slavery," she pulsed to the gathered leaders, her light patterns visible for kilometers through the clear water. "That some things are worth dying for." Within days, Delphian engineering crews began modifying their city's biomechanical systems. Kelp farms that fed millions were retrofitted to produce toxic spores lethal to Valkyrian physiology. Pressure regulation. Systems designed to protect against deep ocean crushing forces were reversed, turning entire city districts into implosion weapons. The Delphians' natural ability to create bioluminescent displays became a tool for coordinated attacks, their light shows now carrying tactical information instead of artistic beauty. When Valkyrian oversight ships arrived for their monthly inspection, they found the ocean surface apparently calm and normal. But beneath the waves, every Delphian city had become a death trap waiting to be triggered. The first inspection team that descended into New Tiamat never surfaced again, their screams lost in water that had been turned into liquid poison. Meanwhile, in the asteroid belt of the Kepler 438 system, the insectoid collective buzzed with new purpose. These creatures had evolved from hive-minded insects, their society built around queens who coordinated millions of worker drones through pheromone commands. They had been among the Valkyrians' most productive slave species, their natural organization, making them perfect for large-scale manufacturing projects. But human advisor Jiang Minji changed everything. She had been a military engineer before the war, specializing in autonomous weapons systems. When her transport ship was captured during the early fighting, the Valkyrians assigned her to improve collective manufacturing efficiency. Instead, she began secretly teaching the insectoid workers about human military doctrine, using their honed pheromone communication networks to spread tactical knowledge. "Your queens command you to build," she explained to a gathering of worker drones in the main manufacturing hub. "But who commands the queens? Why should you build weapons for your oppressors when you could build weapons for yourselves?" The concept was revolutionary for creatures who had never questioned hierarchical authority. But Jiang Minji's words, translated into pheromone patterns that bypassed conscious thought and spoke directly to their genetic programming, sparked something unprecedented: individual rebellion within a hive mind. The collective's queens found their drones producing new designs without authorization, warrior units programmed with human tactical principles rather than traditional insectoid swarming behavior. These new warriors carried a programming core that translated Admiral Kim Jisu's final words into insectoid logic. No retreat, no surrender, victory or death. When Velkarian overseers discovered the unauthorized production, they faced swarms of warrior drones that fought with calculated ferocity instead of instinctive cooperation. Each drone was programmed to continue fighting even when separated from the hive mind, turning every individual unit into a miniature version of humanity's desperate courage. But perhaps the most shocking transformation occurred on the energy world of Lumios, where beings of pure consciousness existed as living light within crystalline matrices. The Luminians had been conquered not through military force, but through the threat of disrupting their energy sources, essentially holding their entire species hostage. They served as living batteries for Velkarian technology, their life force, literally powering the Empire's expansion. Dr. Shin Wusung, a quantum physicist who had escaped Earth's destruction, found refuge among the Luminians after his research vessel was destroyed. These beings of pure energy could sustain his life indefinitely, but in return he taught them something they had never considered: that their own life force could be weaponized. "You are not just energy sources," he explained, through quantum resonance patterns that allowed communication with their consciousness. "You are living weapons of unlimited potential. The Velkarians fear disrupting your matrices because they need you alive. But what if you chose to disrupt yourselves?" The concept was terrifying to beings who had existed for millennia in stable energy states. But as they processed the tactical data from human battles, the Luminians began to understand that controlled self-destruction could be the ultimate weapon. They learned to overload their crystalline matrices at will, creating energy explosions that could vaporize Velkarian ships while allowing their consciousness to transfer to backup crystals hidden throughout their world. War Marshal Thexalar stood in his command center aboard the flagship Dominion, watching tactical displays that painted a picture of galactic rebellion unlike anything in recorded history. Red warning lights pulsed across star maps as reports flooded in from occupied worlds throughout the Empire. "Sir," clicked his aide, Commander Vexcalar, "we have confirmed uprisings on 37 worlds. The pattern is identical across all systems: conquered species implementing human tactical doctrine with modifications suited to their biology and environment." Thexalar's compound eyes focused on damage reports that defied military logic. Entire fleets were being destroyed by enemies who should have been producing resources for the Empire. Worlds that had been compliant for decades were suddenly too dangerous to occupy. "How do we defeat an enemy that considers victory and death the same thing?" he asked his assembled staff, his mandibles clicking with frustration that bordered on terror. The command center fell silent except for the steady pulse of warning alarms. For the first time in 4 centuries of conquest, the Velkarian Empire faced enemies who refused to be conquered, and none of their military doctrine offered solutions for fighting opponents who viewed survival as optional. The contagion of human courage had infected the galaxy, and there was no cure. 2 years had passed since Admiral Kim Jisu's fleet died fighting at Kepler Station, and the galaxy burned with rebellions that showed no sign of ending. The Velkarian Empire, once the undisputed master of 17 star systems, now struggled to maintain control over half their territory. Their economy hemorrhaged resources into endless conflicts against enemies who treated death as victory and defeat as unacceptable. In the crystalline towers of the Velkarian homeworld, War Marshal Thexalar presented casualty reports to the Supreme Council that painted a picture of systematic collapse. The holographic displays showed red zones spreading across their territorial maps like a plague, each marking a world where their occupation forces had been destroyed or driven into hiding. "The mathematics are clear. Thexelar clicked to the assembled counselors, his compound eyes reflecting the chamber's bioluminescent patterns. "We cannot sustain current force deployments. The humans have infected every conquered species with their tactical doctrine. Where we once faced individual rebellions, we now confront coordinated galactic resistance." Counselor Vexmiran's ancient form creaked as she leaned forward, her mechanical augmentations sparking with electrical discharge. "Present your recommended course of action, War Marshal." The words that came next had never been spoken in the council chamber's 400-year history. "We must negotiate." The silence that followed was broken only by the crystalline wall's natural harmonic resonance. For centuries, the Velkarian Empire had expanded through overwhelming force, followed by generous terms for surrender. They had never retreated, never compromised, never shown weakness to conquered populations. But the human example had taught the galaxy that some things were worth dying for, and the Empire faced extinction if the fighting continued. 3 months later, in the ruins of what had once been Geneva, Switzerland, a prisoner exchange took place that would determine the galaxy's future. The location was symbolic, chosen because it represented humanity's commitment to diplomacy even in wartime. But the building itself told a different story. Its walls scarred by energy weapons, and its roof partially collapsed from orbital bombardment. Admiral Kim Jisoo walked across the rubble-strewn floor with steady steps, her grey prison uniform replaced by a fresh naval dress uniform that somehow made her look more dangerous than any weapon. 2 years of captivity had changed her, stripping away the last traces of the career officer who had once followed orders without question. Her dark eyes burned with something that made even her human escorts uncomfortable. The Velkarian delegation waited on the opposite side of the ruined chamber, their tall insectoid forms draped in ceremonial armor that gleamed despite the building's destroyed lighting. Ambassador Kexthaler, chosen for his diplomatic skills rather than military rank, extended a formal greeting in galactic standard language. "Admiral Kim Jisoo," he clicked through his translator device, "the Velkarian Empire wishes to discuss terms for ending hostilities between our species." Jisoo stopped 10 meters away, close enough to see her reflection in his compound eyes, but far enough to demonstrate that she did not fear their physical superiority. "I'm listening." "We offer complete autonomy for all human-controlled territories," Kexthaler continued, consulting a holographic display of proposed treaty terms. "No Velkarian forces will enter your systems. No tribute will be demanded. In exchange, you will broadcast orders to all rebel factions calling for an end to resistance activities." The offer was unprecedented in galactic history. Never before had the Velkarian Empire withdrawn from conquered territory or granted complete independence to a defeated species. But Jisoo's response came without hesitation. No. The single word echoed through the ruined chamber like a weapon's discharge. Kexthaler's mandibles clicked in confusion as he processed her rejection of terms that should have been beyond human dreams. "Admiral," he said carefully, "perhaps you misunderstood our offer. Complete autonomy means, I understand perfectly." Jisoo interrupted, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had stared death in the face and chosen to fight anyway. "You want to save your empire by sacrificing every other species you've enslaved. There will be no negotiation with tyrants. We will accept nothing less than the complete liberation of every world you've conquered." The Velkarian delegation exchanged rapid clicks and hisses in their native language, their translator devices struggling to keep up with the emotional intensity of their communication. Finally, Kexthaler spoke again, his voice tight with something approaching desperation. "Admiral, the alternative is total war. Every species in the galaxy will suffer if this conflict continues. Surely reasonable beings can find common ground." Jisoo smiled, and the expression was more terrifying than any weapon she could have drawn. "You taught us that there is no common ground between free beings and tyrants. We learned the lesson well." The negotiations collapsed within hours, but the real decision had already been made in council chambers and rebel hideouts across the galaxy. Species that had never worked together began coordinating attacks with military precision learned from human tactical manuals. The Delphians synchronized their bioluminescent communication networks with collective pheromone signals. The Luminians shared energy patterns that allowed other species to overload Valkyrian technology. The synthetic beings contributed computational power that turned individual rebellions into a galactic-wide military campaign. The final assault on the Valkyrian capital began not with human ships, but with a coordinated uprising from within. Slave workers in the crystal mines had spent months preparing explosives using techniques taught by captured human engineers. Service drones maintained by the collective had been reprogrammed to recognize their masters as enemies. Even the energy, beings who powered the city's systems, chose synchronized overload rather than continued servitude. Admiral Jisoo stood on the bridge of the captured Valkyrian dreadnought, Retribution, watching through the viewports as the enemy capital burned. Beneath multiple explosions, around her, beings from a dozen different species worked side by side at control stations, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of cooperation that would have been impossible before humanity taught them that freedom was worth. Dying for Captain Song Hyuk, somehow still alive after 2 years of leading guerrilla operations, reported from the planet's surface through crackling communications. All primary government centers are secured. Valkyrian leadership is requesting terms for surrender. Tell them, Jisoo said quietly, her words carrying to every rebel fleet throughout the system, that we don't negotiate with tyrants. Complete liberation or total destruction, those are their only choices. The Valkyrian Empire's surrender came 3 hours later, broadcast across every communication network in known space. But the victory belonged not to humanity alone, but to every species that had learned the simple truth that some things were worth dying for. As Jisoo watched the last Valkyrian warship power down its weapons and broadcast surrender codes, she thought about the 23 ships that had died at Kepler Station. Their sacrifice had taught the galaxy that retreat was simply another word for choosing when to lose. The universe would never be the same. The concept of inevitable conquest had died with her fleet, replaced by the understanding that freedom was worth any price, and that the willingness to die for principles could overcome any military advantage. Humanity had refused to retreat, and in doing so, had given the galaxy a gift more valuable than any technology or resource: the knowledge that tyrants could be defeated by those brave enough to fight without compromise. The end.